that each week we can come and worship you and just learn more about you. I pray you give JP the words to say and that you soften our hearts to just listen to what you have to say to us. We love you in your son's name. Amen.
Birthday. I was going to say, or as you know, in my house, it's Kinsler's birthday today. So Kinsler's 4 years old. So I turned 30 on Friday, and Kinsler's 4 today, which makes me feel even more old.
You only look 20.
What's that?
You only look 20.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The beard's coming back a little bit, though. It's coming back. We get some stubble in. So, can you guys get this mic turned on for me? That'd be great. Yep. Yep. Maybe. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. Hey, so we're kicking off a new series today called I Am. Are you guys familiar with the story of Moses? Yes, some of you, okay. So here's the deal with this series, though. We're not really focusing on Moses. We're focusing on who God is. So you can see like the little subtitle, right? Learning from Moses' encounter with God. So this is a series where we get to talk about God, but we look at the story of Moses and his interactions with God to figure out who God is and to see what can we learn about who God is through Moses' interaction with him. Have you guys ever met anybody famous? Who have you met, Kale?
Shaq.
You met Shaq? Dude, that's legit. Was he just massive, like...
Yeah, I mean, I was like 9, so I was like 4 feet tall.
Yeah, that's crazy.
George Strait.
George Strait, the king. If you need to tell Noah that next time you see him, he'll start crying probably. Anybody else? Anybody famous? Dave?
I met Shaquille O'Neal on a basketball court.
On a basketball court, you met Shaq.
Okay.
Take that, Kale. Yeah. That's cool. Did he dominate you? Like, did you get to play anything?
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
He just crushed everyone. That's good. Who'd you meet? Abby Wambach. That's legit. Very good. Yeah, so I don't know about you guys, but I think that's crazy. Like when I go to a basketball game or a baseball game even, I'm like, yo, like, I'm in the same room as Tim Duncan. Like that, like I kind of fangirl over that stuff or whatever, right? And so I know Becky's done a lot of VIPs at concerts. We were talking about that the other day. Like I've done a bunch of that too, like Switchfoot, like I've met them 3 or 4 times. Like those guys are really cool. Anne Berlin is one of my favorite bands. Those guys are super cool. We've done VIP with them. Like we've done a couple like Rangers deals, like spring training where we've gotten autographs and stuff like that. But my favorite story of meeting a celebrity, I was telling some of you guys this story the other day. I met Manu Ginobili. I've actually like talked to him a couple times, which is crazy. But my favorite interaction with Manu was this time. So I used to work at First Baptist Church in Universal City, and my job was like student ministry and recreation ministry. So as a part of that, I ran our Upward Basketball League, which I know it's upward, but whatever. Right? So I ran this league, and so as a part of this league, we would do a night at the Spurs game. And so we would take all the families that were in our group, and they could buy tickets for a discounted rate. We would go have like this party, and then get to watch the Spurs game together. Well, as a perk for being like the group leader and setting this up and bringing all these people to the Spurs game, they would frequently give me like something else, like this little bonus, right? And so the bonus this one year was that I got to be in the fan tunnel. Like when the Spurs come out of the locker room and run towards the court, like I got to be there and high five everybody, and I got to take like 10 people, so my family went down there with me and stuff like that. So it was really cool, and so I'm just like freaking out already because I'm such a big fan. And so these guys all run through and we high five them, and by the time they get out, like I'm just fired up, right? Like I'm just yelling at nothing and just ready to go, beat down the Pistons or whoever it was. And so fired up, right? And then as I'm standing there though, I'm like, man, Manu hasn't come through yet. That's weird. I don't know if Manu was in the bathroom or what, but he was behind the rest of the team. And so then Manu comes out just like maybe 5 or 6 seconds after everybody's gone. And I'm processing like, I didn't high five Manu, that stinks. And then here he comes. And now I'm even more fired up, right? And I don't know what happened. Like I just got caught up in the moment or what. Manu's coming by and I high five him. Like I've got my hand out. I high five him. And as he goes by, I slap him in the butt as he runs through. I'm not lying about that. This is a true thing. I don't know what happened. I was just so fired up, like, yeah, let's go. And Dad was further down the tunnel from me, and I was like, what? Like, did you see that? Did you see me do that? He said, yeah, and Manu just laughed and shook his head at you and ran on the court and played a game. So this hand has touched Manu Ginobili's butt, just so you know. Right, so like we can have these crazy moments where we like freak out and we get all caught up in this interaction. And then like, this is the cheesy transition, but it works, right? Like Moses got to meet God. Moses got to have this conversation with God and interact with him on a much deeper level than just slapping him on the butt as he ran on to go play a basketball game, right? And it's really important that we recognize that we have an opportunity to have a real relationship with God, right? If I ask some of you guys to describe somebody that you're really close friends with, or maybe your mom or dad or your brother or sister, like, I'm sure you guys could do that to some extent for me, right? Like Ty, how would you describe Paul, your older brother? Putting him on the spot this morning. Short? That's a good start.
Nice and friendly.
Nice and friendly.
Funny.
Funny. What does he do? Where does he go to school? Like,
He's a freshman at Baylor.
okay.
He's kind of smart, I guess.
It's kind of smart, I guess. We won't tell him you said that. That's okay.
Hardworking.
Yeah. Cool. It's good. Yeah, like Ty knows Paul, right? Like he has this relationship with him. And so he knows things about him that you may not know. Like you may not have known that Paul went to Baylor, right? And that he was a hard worker. Or that he was short, maybe, if you haven't met him, right? Daly, how would you describe Greenlee? She's in the room, so it's a little more challenging. She's tall. I'm like tall.
She's caring. She's smart. She's bright, and
Did you say crazy? I like that you said that under your breath. That's good. That's right. Right? So you have this relationship with her. So all the stuff bad that she yelled at you this morning, forget that. Just remember that she said you were nice and caring and loving and all that stuff. That's good. Right? Like we have these relationships with somebody. It would be weird if like I was married to Michaela and you were like, hey, can you describe Michaela? And I was like, she's a human. Like I don't know. Right? Like in these relationships, we get to know these people, and we get to interact with people, and we get to understand qualities about them other than just being tall or short, right? Right? Like we get to understand who this person is, how do they think, what do they like, and all of this stuff. And so in Moses' interaction with God, he got to know him a little bit better, like I said, on a deeper level than just slapping him on the butt on the way in for a basketball game. And so that's why we want to look at the story of Moses so that we can see, like, man, what did Moses understand about God through this interaction? So open up your Bibles to Exodus 3. Exodus is the second book in the Bible, so really close to the front, right after Genesis, Exodus 3. And if you have your Bible this morning, we're going to look at something specific, like in your physical Bible. So open it if you've got it. If not, you can follow along on the screen as well. What do you guys know about Moses? Some of you said you've heard Moses' story. So how does Moses' story start? You guys know? Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty good recap. Yeah, so the Hebrews, right, like, when Joseph found favor with Pharaoh, then the Hebrews were in a pretty good spot in Egypt. And then once a new Pharaoh came in, they weren't in as much of a spot anymore, right? Like, he actually felt threatened by the Hebrew people, and so he enslaved them and started putting them to work, and then put out this rule that said, like, he didn't even want any Hebrew babies around. So if there was a Hebrew baby born, like, we're going to, like, weird, kill it, right? That's pretty dark. And so he was so worried about them overtaking his position that he was just going to wipe them all out. And so the Hebrews are in a bad spot. Moses' mom hides him like in this basket, puts him in the river, and then, like we said, Pharaoh's daughter finds him, and he basically becomes this like fake Egyptian prince. Like he's in the palace, but he's still a Hebrew. And so he learns about this, and then one day he sees an Egyptian kill a Hebrew, and then he gets mad, or he's beating him or whatever, and so Moses gets mad and kills this guy, right? He commits murder, and he's so like overwhelmed with the situation and doesn't know what to do, so he runs. He flees his position as prince of Egypt, and then he runs to Midian. He gets married to this Midianite girl and becomes a shepherd, right? And so this is where we pick up the story. Moses is this shepherd. He's had this crazy life already, but now he's a shepherd just trying to get away from this whole Egypt versus Israel thing. So we pick that up in Exodus 3. So here's what I'd love to do this morning. I'd love for you guys to read this for us out loud. And so we're going to start in chapter 3, verse 1. If somebody could read verses 1 through 3 for me, you can read it off the screen out of your Bible, that'd be great. Go for it. We'll have plenty of opportunities. So.
Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro,
Jethro.
his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came back to the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn.
Cool. Thanks. Anybody else in here like pyro like me? Like you like playing with fire, you like watching fire, you like all things fire, right? Today's a good day for us. We're going to blow things up this afternoon. This is good, right? And so Moses is just minding his own business. He's watching the sheep like he's supposed to, and then he sees this bush that is on fire, right, which is represented in this graphic. He sees this bush that's on fire, but it's not going away. Like, I grew up like in the country kind of, and so we had all of these bonfires out in the back, and we would cut down a tree or something, and you throw it in there, and the fire's huge at first, right? Because it's like all this wood is lighting up, but eventually all that stuff burns away, and so the fire gets smaller, and then it dies out or whatever. This bush is burning, but it's not going away. It's just sitting there, like flaming, but not disintegrating, like in this place. And so it catches Moses' attention, and he finds out, like, God is here in this moment. Like, I'm going to go see this. And so he turns to see that. And then we pick it back up in verses 4 through 6. Can somebody read 4 through 6 for us? Do you want to read? Yeah, 4 through 6. Thanks.
When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God.
Thanks. Yeah, so Moses figures out really quick, right, that this isn't just some weird natural phenomenon that's happening. Like, God is present. In that first passage that we read, it said an angel of the Lord, right? And what we figure out is this isn't just any angel. This is actually God trying to get Moses' attention, trying to speak to him and have this conversation. I don't know about you, but, like, the burning bush thing would already freak me out a little bit. But then for that to, like, start hearing a voice from that would be crazy. And then to find out that this is, like, God, like the God is speaking in this moment. And so how does Moses respond? Like, he hides his face, right? And God's saying, like, I am the God of your history, basically, right? Your whole family, your people, like, I am the God over all of that. And so Moses would have known about that. He knew the stories of Abraham and Isaac and of Jacob and of Joseph. Like, this culture, like, taught these things. And so this was a big deal. He's realizing in this moment, like, oh, this is a celebrity. This is the celebrity to me. And I'm here in his presence. And so God identifies himself so that Moses understands what's going on. And this is new for Moses, obviously. God had spoken to people before, but not to Moses. And so let's read 7 through 9. Let's continue. Who's got that for me? Somebody on this side. Yeah.
Then the Lord said, I have truly seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their blasphemy. I know their sufferings, and I have come out to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and bring them out of the out of that land to a good and broad land, and I have brought them to a place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites.
Thanks. Yeah, so God says in this moment, like, he has made this promise to the Israelites, right? To these Hebrew people. He says, hey, like, you are my people. I am your God. I'm going to take care of you. And so he's telling Moses, like, look, I'm seeing what's going on in Egypt, and this is not right? Like, this is not how my people should be treated. It's time to save them out of that and give them this land that we've promised. And so God's saying, like, this is what I'm going to do. And now he's going to tell Moses what the plan is to do that. So verses 10 through 12. Can somebody read that for us? Preston?
Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? He said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you, that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain.
Thanks. So have you guys ever been in a situation where somebody came up with a plan, like, man, here's what we should do. Like, I have this great idea. And then they're like, oh, and by the way, you should be the one to do it. It's like, whoa, I was on board with the plan, but now you're wanting me to carry it out? Like, I don't know about that, right? And so Moses is, I'm sure, fully behind this plan to rescue the Hebrews, to rescue the Israelites. And then God says, I want you to do it, right? And so Moses is freaking out. He says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring them out? Like, he's thinking about in this moment, like, he's just a shepherd, right? He's already got this, like, history with Egypt and this tension because he killed a guy there. He doesn't belong there. And so he's like, who am I that I'm the one that you're choosing to go, right? Which is a way that we can frequently feel, like, who am I that God would choose me or save me from my sins or call me to be a witness to my friends or whatever. Moses is in that spot. And God says, I'm going to give you this sign, like, you're going to come back and worship on this mountain. I'm going to do this through you. So one of the things that's crazy, we're about to finish this passage and go verses 13 through 15. One of the things that's crazy here, though, that we're about to see, and so I want to tell you this before we read it, is the people don't know God's name yet, right? Like, I don't know if you've thought about that. Like, what is God's actual name? And maybe you know what that is, and we're going to read that here in just a second. But at this point, Moses doesn't have this personal relationship with God. And the Hebrews and the Israelites, like, a lot of people argue how much they actually understood about who God was. In their culture at the time, there were all of these different gods. And so, like, a lot of people just worshiped a God in general. But God is about to make this thing really personal, right? He's about to lean in on a different level. So can somebody read verses 13 through 15 for me? Okay.
Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, that I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also, there we go, said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations.
Thanks. Yeah, so you're like, you said God was going to say his name. Like, I was expecting something like Larry or Gerald or something like that, right? Like, no. This is a different deal. So, God, what's God's response? What does he say his name is? I am. Like, think about that for a second. Like, I think this is so cool. God just says, I am. Right? Like, when you see me, you're like, hey, what's up, JP? Like, JP identifies me, right? Jonathan Powers, that's where JP comes from, right? Like, that means that's who I am. That's who you know me as. Like, and there's also ties in there because my last name is Powers. It means that I'm related to those two because they're my parents, right? And, like, I'm part of this Powers family tree and all this. Like, that identifies who I am, right? God just says, I am. And I don't know about you, but I'm like, you are what? Like, Bob? Like, what? I am what? Right? Maybe Moses is sitting there waiting for him to finish. Like, God is just saying, I am all of it. Like, I am everything. I am. It's like this mic drop. Like, God is everything. He holds everything. He is everything. I am. Which is crazy. And so it's crazy, too, to think about, like, the Hebrews hadn't heard this yet. They hadn't understood that he had this name yet. But I am, when you translate it to English, you get these 4 letters, right? This is a whole complicated thing, but I'm going to give you just the basics this morning. So I am translated to when that's translated, it's translated from YHWH. There are no vowels in the Hebrew, right? So YHWH, like you can't say that without any vowels. I don't know if you know this, but vowels are necessary, right? And so YHWH is God's name. And so we pronounce that as Yahweh or Jehovah, right? But this is who God is. So when he says I am, he's saying Yahweh, Jehovah, like I am all things, but Yahweh or Jehovah is God's name. And so one of the things that's confusing about this, you're like, well, JP, you just said that God, like, they didn't know his name or whatever, but don't they call him, like, Lord in Genesis, right? Genesis comes before Exodus, right? We said we're in the second book. And anytime you see the word Lord in all caps, which is weird up here because, like, these are all in all caps, right, when we read these verses. But in the Bible, when you see the word Lord in all caps, it's actually God's, like, proper name. That's Yahweh or Jehovah, like, I am. When it's in all caps, that's what it is. And so we see that a couple times in Genesis. And so it might be like, well, I thought we didn't know his name yet. Do you guys know who wrote Genesis? Moses wrote Genesis, right? Moses wrote Genesis after Exodus happened, right? So when we read God's, like, proper name, when we read the Lord or Yahweh or Jehovah in Genesis, it's from this moment where God interacts with them and reveals this for the very first time, which seems crazy, right? So, like, Adam and Eve didn't know what God's proper name was. The Lord, I am, Jehovah, Yahweh, right? This is a huge deal because, like I said, we're changing the game a little bit. They're going from following this thing that they don't really understand to following a person who's introduced himself. Right? Like, if you went to the White House and you got to meet the president and you said, like, hey, Mr. President, and he was like, no, just call me Joe. Like, how weird would that be, right? Like, that changes the dynamic a lot, right? Changes the dynamic a lot because it's more personal. It's more, you're, like, interacting now, right? If I would have slapped Manu on the butt and he would have turned around and been like, hey, man, what's your name? Which would have been weird given the circumstances. And then we, like, exchanged names. Like, now it's a different thing, right? It's a personal conversation. He knows who I am. I know who he is. And our relationship starts and changes a little bit. So this is actually a really, really big deal. The Israelites are finding out that this God is separating himself from everything else. Like I said, at the time, their culture, like, they were still trying to figure out who God was. And so some people thought there was, like, the God of the sea and the God of the mountains and the God of the storm or whatever it is, right? They thought there were all these different things, and collectively that made up God. And still in our culture, right, people argue that, like, well, God is God, and whether you see that as Buddha or Allah or whatever, like, it's just God. No. That's not what's happening here. God is setting himself apart from all of that. He's saying, I'm not just a collection of all these things or ideas, or you believe what you want to about me, and you believe what you want to about me, and that's fine. No, he's saying, like, I am Yahweh. I am God. I am the God over all things. Some of you guys have been to my house and you've met our dog, Minnie, our golden retriever. So Minnie's super hyper. Josh, the first time he came in our house, she, like, jumped up and, like, tore his shirt and ripped a bracelet off of him or something. Like, just, I don't know what it is about you, man. You're cologne or what? I don't know. That was messed up. Right? So Minnie, if you've been to our house and you've seen our dog, like, you would probably be able to recognize her, right? If you saw her, you might be like, oh, that's JP and Michaela's dog. That's Minnie. Right? She's this, like, red-colored golden retriever. Like, if it were me, I would recognize her bark, and that her left eye, like, waters a little bit. Like, I know which dog is mine, right? It would be weird for you to leave here today and see somebody walking their dog, and they've got this, like, Pomeranian or whatever, or Great Dane that they're walking, and you're like, hey, maybe that's JP and Michaela's dog. It's like, just because it's a dog, right? Like, if you've seen my dog and you know that it's, like, she's this red color, and then you saw a white dog out there and you're like, hey, maybe that's Minnie. Like, no. Like, what are you crazy? No, there are these characteristics and these things that set Minnie apart from other dogs. Like, just category of dog doesn't mean anybody can be anything within that, right? And so this is what's happening here is God saying, like, no, I'm not just any God. Like, I am Yahweh. I am everything. I am God. And so it's a big deal for us to understand that God is changing the game here in this interaction with Moses. And so our first point this morning is this. Josh is going to throw it up on the screen for us. There is one true God. You have to understand there is one true God. He stands alone. And so he knew that his people were in trouble. He's chasing after them. He says, I am the one true God. I'm the one who's going to pull you out of this. And so we have to know that God sets himself apart from everything else, right? God doesn't give us the option to think like, oh, he's just another God. There is one true God. So in that, we can also learn this. Let's reread Exodus 3:14. It says this, God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And so the second thing about God is that he is eternal and unchanging. Right? When God says I am, like I said earlier, it means he encompasses everything. I was reading this book a couple months ago, and it was talking about the idea of time, right? And how for us, there's like past, present, and future. You guys like Back to the Future movies? Like, I think those are amazing, right? And you like see them go back to the Old West, and they jump forward, they jump back to the 80s, and they come back, and like they're jumping forth. And so in our minds, there's this timeline of past, present, and future. But that doesn't apply the same way for God, right? And so in this book that I was reading, what it was saying is, if you took a piece of paper and you drew a line on it that represented all of time, right? Where would you put God on that line? Everywhere, right? Because God is not defined, like he's not limited by this line that we just drew on this paper. Like, God is the paper. Like, God holds time in himself. So when God says, I am, he says, all of these things that you think and all of these things that you experience exist within me. I am everything. So God is the paper that our little timeline is drawn on. And so what that means is the one true God that sets himself apart from everything else, he is eternal and unchanging. So if you've been around me at all lately, you've heard me say the word steadfast a lot. And here's the deal. Like, I opened up this Bible study and I started reading and I'm like, students don't want to hear this. Like, I keep talking about this concept over and over that God is steadfast and changing. I even preached about it up the hill last week, right? But in moments like that, here's an important thing to realize. Like, yeah, I'm kind of sick of hearing this steadfast thing too. I'm like, God, show me something different. Like, I want to learn something new now. But what that means that we keep hearing this and we keep seeing this is God is trying to teach us something that we're not getting yet. And so lean in on this. God is steadfast. He's eternal. He's unchanging. I want to read Psalm 90, verse 2 together. Josh, can you throw that up on the screen for us? It says, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Right? What does Genesis 1:1 say? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? In the beginning, God. We talked about this at camp, right? John 1:1 says the same thing. Like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So in the beginning, before anything else, before the mountains were formed and all of that, God existed before all of that. Now let's look at Psalm 102:25 through 27. We'll throw that on the screen too. It says, of old you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. You will change them like a robe, and they will pass away. But you are the same, and your years have no end. It's crazy, like, God is unchanging. Not only did he exist before and he will exist after, like, he holds all time, but he also doesn't change. Have you guys ever had a friend that you were really close with, and then something changed about either you or about them, and then you guys just weren't friends anymore, right? Like, maybe it wasn't even this big blow up where you got mad and there was all this drama. You just changed, right? And you drifted apart. Michaela and I celebrated our 8-year wedding anniversary last week too. It's been a crazy week for us. So 8 years last week. And one of the things that I think is funny when we look back on wedding pictures and stuff is our wedding party. And you can ask other adults in the room too, like, this may be the same case for them. Our wedding party, like, of the 12 people that were in our wedding party or whatever it was, like, I really only talked to like 2 of my groomsmen. Like, it's crazy how at that moment, 8 years ago, when we were celebrating that together, it was like, man, this is our group of our closest friends. These are the people who we want to stand by us on this day when we make this commitment. And then 8 years go by, and like, some of those people I don't even talk to anymore, right? And it's not necessarily that there was this big argument or anything, just things have changed, right? Like, for example, when you have kids, things change and your schedules change and you're not able to just drop everything and go to a movie really quick, right? Things change. And so sometimes that's good, but a lot of times that can be bad, right? Raise your hand if you would say you're somebody who doesn't like change. Yeah. I don't really like change either. I kind of want to know what's coming next. I know Megan was freaking out when you guys like shaved my beard. She's like, I can't even look at you. What's the matter with this, right? It's coming back. Like I said, it's coming back. Change, like part of the reason we don't like it is because it's unpredictable. We don't know what's coming next. But the thing about God is he is unchanging, which means like we know what's coming. Like he's going to be steadfast. He's going to be constant in that. Let's read one more verse. Malachi 3:6. Man, this mic is awesome. For I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore, you, O children of Jacob, are not consumed. Right? This is good news for us. Because God doesn't change, we know that he loves us. We know that he cares. We know that he's going to come through. And so, the one true God is eternal and unchanging. Last point for this morning is this. The one true unchanging God, we're going to add to that, makes himself known to us. Right? If we circle back to the beginning of our conversation where God reveals his name and changes the dynamic and makes this a little bit more personal, we realize that like God is all of these incredible things, but not only is he that, like he wants this relationship with us. He wants us to know him and he wants to know us, which is why he sends his son to die for us, right? Let's look at John 1:14. This is another verse that we looked at camp. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Right? God was there at the very beginning, and then because of this last point, because he wants to have this relationship with us, he became flesh and came to dwell among us. So think about this fact that we have this opportunity to have this relationship with God. The King of everything, the God of the universe, the one who writes all of history and will write all that is to come. Like God is in charge of all that, and he wants this relationship with you. So like when I get all fangirl because I'm going to meet the guitar player for Switchfoot at a concert, or high five Manu Ginobili on the butt, right? Like we get all like caught up in this and like, man, this is so cool, this is so exciting. And like it may seem cheesy or corny or whatever, but like God really does want that relationship with you, and he's way bigger of a deal than any of the other people we could list on our like who would I like to have dinner with list, right? God reveals himself, and we see it throughout, and it specifically with the Israelites, right? He shows up again and again and again. Eventually in this story, right, Moses goes to Pharaoh and God works through him after all these plagues and stuff, and Pharaoh not understanding, like his people are set free. Like God releases his people from slavery, and then he does all these other crazy things, including parting the Red Sea. Like for miles and miles, God opens up the sea and they walk through it because he cares about them. He wants this relationship with them. And so that's the first thing that we want to catch in this series is, man, God is eternal, he is unchanging, he's the one true God, and he wants to know you. And so over the next 3 weeks, our interns are going to continue to teach. I think Haley's down here next week. And so we're going to continue to look at the story of Moses and this interaction and what we can learn about God. But one of the things I want you to hear this morning is maybe you're in a place where you're trying to figure out what is next in your faith. Like what is the next thing that I need to do to grow? What is the next thing that I need to do to be a better Christian or whatever? And what I would say is know who God is, right? Accept this invitation to have a personal relationship with him. And for some of you, you're like, oh, I already prayed and got saved, like I did that when I was a little kid. Okay, do you know him though? Like, are you in this personal relationship with him? Are you seeking to find out who he is and letting that change who you are? Because the way that this works, like this is not just this list of, you're a Christian if you do these things. You're a Christian if you know who God is and you're in a relationship with him. And so let's celebrate this morning that, man, God came to Moses and gave him his name and invited him into a more direct relationship where we get to interact with him. And let's walk in that so that we can be changed by him. Let me pray for us, and then Josh has a couple of announcements, and we'll head to some groups to talk about it some more. God, thank you so much for loving us. God, we want to pause this morning and recognize your power. God, that you are. God, that you are over everything, that everything exists within you and nothing can exist apart from you. God, you are Yahweh, you are Jehovah, you are God, you are the Lord. And God, it's so cool that we have the opportunity to sit here this morning and talk about you and to talk with you. And so God, I pray that you would help us to not miss that. Pray that we wouldn't miss that you're inviting us into something bigger than what we could experience without you. And so, God, pray that we would lean into that today. And God, we love you so much. Thank you for your word. Amen.
All right, sweet guys. So there's only one announcement. So Engage this Wednesday, we're going to be having a dodgeball tournament at 6:30. So yeah, make y'all's teams beforehand, or if you don't make your team, we'll put you in a team. Dinner will be provided. We're going to be having pizza, but you guys are able to bring desserts. So make sure to bring something sweet and something good. So yeah, talk about that. As far as small groups, we're going to have the 6th graders in room 1, 7th graders in room 6, and then 8th graders in room 8, and then the high schoolers, we're going to have you out here in the gym. So yeah, leaders, can you all see me after they dismiss?